this is an issue that all British Columbians, all Canadians really need to pay attention to and to support. If the wild salmon disappear, there's going to be an ecological collapse, a real unraveling that must be stopped. One measure to do this is to remove those open net pen fish farms from the migration routes of our wild salmon. That's essential. Yes.
What's been the latest on the occupation? What has developed in the last couple of days here?
There is a commitment. We have Willie Moon here who is going to speak to that. But they're here to stay. They are determined to continue to occupy those fish farms until the province has taken up the political will that they have. They have the jurisdiction not to renew the licenses of occupation of fish farms. And once they're able to do that, once they exercise that political will to do it, then those fish farms will have to be removed.
What I have to show you today is a letter from the First Nation Wild Salmon Alliance. And what we've done is we've talked to First Nation leaders gathered here, and I have in excess of half the First Nations of British Columbia signing a letter supporting the occupation that's underway right now on the fish farms. And in this letter is calling on the provincial government to embrace the reports that have come forward, the Cone Commission, the Special Legislative Committee on Sustainable Aquaculture, and force this industry to evolve just as every other resource industry has. It's time for this fish farm industry to become closed containment, land-based. And we've had Chief Willie Moon and I, we met yesterday with Premier Horgan, and we talked with Minister Fraser and Minister Popham. And they've committed to come and meet with us to discuss this, and I look forward to that engagement. And what we have in the territories of the Musqueam people is absolute unity. We have addressed our overlapping claims. We are in unity as community, hereditary leadership, and elected leadership. And so when this government wants to begin the embracing of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, free, prior, and informed consent, we have a very clear message that has spanned 3 decades. It has not wavered in any way, shape, or form. And this letter that I've referenced from the First Nation Wild Salmon Alliance, signed by over half the First Nations in British Columbia, I will be presenting this later today to Premier Horgan at the Leadership Council press conference. And so we got a very clear message, and I think that the good people of British Columbia need to understand the vast majority of First Nations of British Columbia are absolutely opposed to open net cage fish farms. I would dare to say that 90% of the First Nations are in opposition.
That's right.
And so this is something that the governments need to understand.
Just a quick question. Obviously, you've been working on a policy level. How important do you think it is on the ground for First Nations to occupy these farms in order to sort of push things forward?
I believe now that what you're witnessing with the occupation of the fish farms is what happens when the previous governments have turned a deaf ear, when they've relied upon consultation and accommodation, which never ever met the needs of our people. And so after engagement, after engagement, and after engagement with the government at every opportunity, we still have nothing that shows that they've heard, listened, or accommodated the Aboriginal rights of our people. And so now our people have hit the point, seeing that this government has made the correct statements in terms of the proper place for First Nations in Canada, and we have a flashpoint now to draw attention to this critical issue. And this letter that I have from the Wild Salmon Alliance clearly is going to demonstrate to the government that this reaches far beyond the location of fish farms. This is an issue that is province-wide, based on Section 35(1) rights for our access to Aboriginal food fisheries.
We've watched government after government prop up the open net cage fish farms with various incentives, tax breaks, and so forth. That kind of support needs to be in place for closed containment. We have the Numgis First Nation here. They have demonstrated through the Katera closed containment fish farm that you can raise marketable fish. Where is the support from the provincial government? Where is the support from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and other departments to ensure that this burgeoning industry can allow Canada to become a world leader? What is the fear? I think Canadians deserve to be a world leader. We are incredibly brilliant, and we have a vision, and we have a concern for the environment. It's time for closed containment. There's no other answer to this, and we need to get on with protection of wild salmon, period.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, and I want to commend and congratulate all of you for once again coming together from all corners of the province, from up and down the coast, from the interior, and once again raising our voices and serving notice on the governments of this land of Canada and the province of British Columbia that we have every right, we have a fundamental human right to protect the pristine waters of the coast of one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We have every right to protect the waters of our river systems and the livelihoods and the way of life that it has provided for Indigenous peoples, as well as our dear friends and neighbors in various capacities of the sports fishery, commercial fishery, recreation, and the multi-billion-dollar tourism trade in British Columbia. There's a reason that this is the most beautiful place on the planet, because of the blessings from our Creator that manifest themselves in this beautiful province, and we cannot afford, will not accept, and will not tolerate the continued contamination and desecration of our marine ecosystems with the toxic fish farm industry as it exists today. And on behalf of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and our friends and allies, we want to congratulate Chief Willie Moon and others that have actually occupied 2 of the fish farms. We are so grateful for their courage, for their sense of integrity, and for bringing this to the public's attention once more in one of the most effective ways that we know, and that's to occupy the territory, occupy the space, and take action. Talking is over. I want to particularly express my gratitude for my dear friend and colleague, Chief Bob Chamberlain. Most of you here know that he's been giving voice to protect our iconic wild salmon for as long as I've known Chief Chamberlain. And at long last, he is not standing alone, that other people have come together as we have in the past, as we will continue to do in the future, regardless of whether it's the toxic fish farm industry or Kinder Morgan. We have a duty and an obligation to protect the legacy that was handed to us by our ancestors and those that came before us, and we have a duty and an obligation to pass this on to our children and grandchildren in an undiminished state. And as British Columbians, as Canadians, as Indigenous peoples, that's a very sacred duty we carry. And I'm so grateful that you're all here and you know and understand that, and we will continue to work together until those fish farms are on land where they belong. By Lim Lim.
And next we have speaking Chief Don Swanvik, Numgis First Nation, one of the hereditary chiefs of the Kwakwaka'wakw.
Dialakisla Salmon people. Firstly, I want to thank our brothers and sisters of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam for allowing us to be on their territory, their beautiful territory with this great river with the great salmon runs that we want to maintain, we want to build up again. I want to thank you all for coming to show your support and to demonstrate to the world that this is more than just a First Nations issue. This is a global issue. This is for all of us. and protecting our environment. We all know how critical salmon are, not only for nutrition for us, but what we've discovered, how it does look after the forests, look after the animals. I see a sign here, a keystone species, absolutely true. I want to thank the people for coming again. I want to thank all the time. I thank the previous speaker for reminding us that there was enough time for talk. We've talked long enough. It's time for action. There's action happening now. I want to remind us that within our action, we always want to be respectful too, because that's in our tradition. I know we all share these same traditions and same teachings. We're occupying a farm in our territory. We're doing it very respectfully, and we're not going to stop that occupation until that farm goes away. And I know with your support that buoys our ability to do that. So I want to thank you all again for being here, and we're heading in the right direction now. We have to keep going in that direction till all these farms are on land. They're no longer polluting our ocean. Gaelic Tesla.
Gaelic is I'd just like to say something that hasn't been said yet. We all know that we're here to save the wild salmon, but we're here to save our generations as well. I like to send a special thanks to our warriors who are on the occupation right now. All these young people have stepped up and they're occupying it, and it's the young people that are pushing us to do that, and that's why we're here, to save the salmon.
I want to ask our hereditary chief from the Zawadeno, an elected chief counselor from the Zawadeno First Nation, Willie Moon, to come and share a few words. And I invite our Muskama Zawadeno hereditary chiefs and the hereditary chiefs that are here to come and stand in support.
First of all, good afternoon, and I'd like to say it's nice to see some of the faces from last year. As you all recall, we were down here last year, linking arms with the other nations, and it's so sad that we have to come back a year later, and we're still fighting the fight that we have been doing for the past 30 years. And you know, it's getting to the point now where if we don't get these fish farms out of our territory, we will never be able to recover and getting our salmon back into our waters. So today I just want to say to our boys that are out on the farm right now, I'm very proud of them, and we will continue this fight, and we will take it till the governments start to listen to us. We've had meetings today and yesterday, and some of the words I've heard sound very promising. But words are words, action is action. So that's what we're looking for in this next few months. I know we do have a meeting scheduled with the minister or the premier on the North Island. We haven't set a date yet, but we will. And I'm hoping that they will take what we're saying seriously. Get these fish farms out of the water and back on land.
It's an honor for me to come here and see all of you show up and send a message to the federal government and the provincial government that the time of action is now. The federal government, Minister Dominic LeBlanc, Justin Trudeau, John Horgan, Rana Pafam, you guys move your butts and get over to the fish farms and speak with those people who are occupying the fish farms and listen to them. Open your eyes to the reality that fish farms are harming the wild salmon, the herring, the clam beds, and they're fouling the marine environment, and this must come to an end. It only takes the political will for the province to finally step forward as a new government, the NDP government, to say, let's make history. Let's cleanse the waters of open net pen fish farms and give our wild salmon a chance to come back in the higher numbers that we need. And make no mistake, we're not going to stop until the fish farms are out. Make no mistake, this is the time of action, and we've got to get the job done before it's too late. Can you imagine beautiful British Columbia without wild salmon? That would be an absolute catastrophe, an ecological disaster, and a great, great harm to the wild salmon economy here. Without wild salmon, if the wild salmon go, it means the unraveling of an ecosystem that is so dear to us and upon which we all depend as human beings. And we're not the only ones who depend on wild salmon either. Everybody knows that. But the open net pen fish farms are destroying that wild salmon. So thank you, from the bottom of my heart, thank each and every one of you for standing up today. My message to you now is to write those letters, sign those petitions, get out there and send those messages, phone the Prime Minister, phone Dominic LeBlanc, phone Lana Poufam, phone all those people who have the power that it takes to remove the fish farms, so that we can have a powerful collective movement that can make history and get this doggone job done. Hosian.
We have a special guest speaker from the Fraser River, Chief Michelle Edwards.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Edwards. I'm the chief of the Shekelwash and Kikaitan community in the Statliam Nation. We're located on the Fraser River. And when we talk about these fish farms, the reason it impacts us upstream is because the Fraser salmon sockeye are going right by these, and we're seeing them deplete. And it's not good. And it's very sad what is being created up in the rivers, what we're losing, what we're all losing. In my community, we have 3 spawning channels. So we're home to the fish. This gift that was given to us, we're making sure that they have a home to come to. We don't even fish these salmon. They're coming there because we're looking after their home. We're greeting them. They're there to feed the bears, and the eagles, the bugs, the land. The very gift that was given to all of us, every one of us. And asked Chief Bob to let me speak because I needed to let everybody know that these salmon that are being penned up, these salmon that have no purpose to the gifts that were given to us. I can't understand what these salmon are actually feeling in a caged up pen when they actually can't actually live out the purpose that they were given to by the Creator. They have nowhere to go. They're just swimming around aimlessly. I thought, where are these Atlantic salmon going out there that escaped? They're probably swimming around out there wondering, where am I supposed to go? Where's my home? Who am I supposed to be mating with? How many babies am I supposed to have? They can't even do that. That is what they were there for. That is why the Creator gifted them to us. Our stocks are depleting so drastically, you know, that the fighting is going to start going on. For me, I have to be a voice for the animals. I have to be a voice for the land. I have to be a voice for the fish, because without them, we start losing everything. We start losing what our fight is all about, who we are as people, what we're supposed to be teaching our children. We can't do that right now. We can go down there and we can be by the river. We can listen to the water. We can see the fish jumping through these falls. Because that's something that they're supposed to do. But we can't put our nets in the water. We can't fish them. And that's what's happening to the sockeye that are swimming through these pens. and they need to get out. They need to really look at our way of life, everybody's way of life. You know, we don't look after the spawning channels for the commercial fishermen. They've never come up and said, thank you, Chief, for looking after our fish. We're looking after their investment in a way, but we're looking after it because it feeds the bears that come to our spawning channel to feed on them. And that's how people need to start looking at it. We're looking after an investment. They need to come and give back. They need to come back and drop tobacco and make an offering and say, thank you for doing this for us.
Yes.
But nobody's doing that. I need to go up north to the Chilcote, to the Quesnel River and say thank you for looking after the fish that we catch, because that is the run. We need to educate ourselves on the complexity of the salmon and who they are and what they do for us, because then we will start respecting that journey. That is the most sacred journey of any journey that is out there, and that is how I feel about them, and that is what I fight for.
They will say in 2017, that is when it changed, when a group of people came together and they ended those fish farms here in BC. They moved them to the land where they belong. We are at a critical point in our history. You look all around us, the climate is changing. You look at the forest fires that we haven't seen before. You look at the depleting stocks of our wild salmon. Something is screaming out to us, it has to change. That BC is mismanaging this precious resource for all of us. And if they can do it, and I think if you've seen it yourself here today, it's we, the First Nations, we will be responsible for it if government can't. Time has shown that their policies, their mechanisms to keep the fish in the pen don't work. They don't keep them in the pen. I think it's time that the BC government and Department of Fisheries and Oceans puts an end to this and begins to look at our wild salmon. You look at their numbers that they give each of us every year for the salmon that we can get. Their numbers that they tell us that we can get. Their numbers are based on so that the commercial fishing industry can continue on. They're not based on conservation. They're not based on the best interest of the salmon. They're not based on our interests. They're based on commercial fishing. It's time to wake up. The time of talking is done. And I thank you for getting out there, because it's time for action. Wherever your community is, talk to your family, talk to your community. Get them out there, get them involved, because we need your help. Write the letters, talk to your MLA, talk to your MP, do whatever it is within your power that you can do, because it makes a difference.
Yes.
You're here today, it makes a difference. We can do this together, my friends. No fish farms here. Join me. No fish farms here. No fish farms here. No fish farms here. No fish farms here. No fish farms here.
No fish farms here.
This is a serious issue. And again, when we're talking about a lot of the deformities, a lot of the diseases that they have, the threat to our wild salmon, any of them even joining some of the wild salmon and getting near them is going to cause a lot of those, because they don't have the immunity systems that they have built up with the fish farms and the antibiotics and things that they're giving them to maintain them in their fish pens. And when they're getting out, those kind of diseases can spread because our wild salmon is not exposed to those kind of diseases. And so that's why it's a huge threat. And when everything I say today is like, we're always looking for the next 7 generations. The decisions that we make today will impact our future, and our future children need wild salmon, just like the rest of us. Thank you.
My name's Aaron Sam, and I'm chief of the Lower Nicollet Indian Band. I'd like to thank Eddie Gardner for organizing this and getting everybody here today. You know, this is an important issue. We come from the interior, but as everybody here knows, you know, the salmon, it's just not a coastal issue, it's not an island issue. It's an issue for all British Columbians, all Canadians, internationally. And the time of, we've heard it already by many eloquent speakers before me, but the time for action is now. We need to learn from the lessons of Canada's East Coast. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, their future, it will be directly affected by what we do today. My grandmother and my mother have told me the stories of when living in the interior on the Thompson and the Fraser, where when the fish come up, there would be ribbons of red on the side coming up into our territory. And I believe prior to that, 150 years ago or 200 years ago or even farther back, we had rivers of red in the summer months. So, you know, the time of action is now. We have to work together. It's not just for Indigenous people, it's not just for British Columbians or Canadians, it's for all of us. To my left, I have the Minister, Scott Fraser, here beside me. I think this is a real, an important time, and I believe that I'm really excited that I'm going to be working, and all First Nations are going to be working with Minister Fraser over the coming years. And I believe we have a real opportunity to work together to protect our waters, protect our wild salmon, for us today and into the future. So I'm really excited to have Minister Fraser here to say a few words and to talk about how we're going to work together for all of us. So here you go. Thank you, Minister Fraser.
Thanks, Aaron. Aaron Salmon and I go back on protecting water issues many years, so I very much appreciate his sage advice on this stuff. Look, I'm the Minister of Aboriginal Relations, Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. I've been an MLA for 12 years. My constituency is Mid-Island Pacific Rim. It's the center of Vancouver Island. I've been a member of the Special Committee on Sustainable Aquaculture that Gordon Campbell appointed, making the opposition the lead on that for the first time in history. So I've traveled to every First Nation on the coast and up every river that has a salmon migrating on it. So I get it. I understand the concerns you're raising here today. I'll tell you, you know, we had 52 recommendations that came forward from our committee, our parliamentary committee, and the Liberal government previously ignored all of them after 15 months of work, and I don't know what that cost. But hey, it's a new era. We've been in for 6 weeks now. We're not issuing any new permits. Cohen inquiry, the Cohen Commission work that was done actually mirrored the same recommendations we made years before in the parliamentary committee. We need to implement Cohen. We have to make sure. We need to make sure that the wild salmon, the marine wild environment, is the priority in government decision making. It's essential to all British Columbians, First Nations and non-First Nations. It's part of what we are in this province. It's part of what we always have been in this province.
I'd like to welcome you all here to my territory as a woman who has roots here in Musqueam. So I thank you for coming out to our territory here today to not only just protest, but to protect wild salmon, to defend wild salmon. Would like to say is that almost 2 years ago now, we were the first ever people from the Ahousaht Nation on the west coast of Vancouver Island who occupied a fish farm and stopped salmon from actually coming in after a permit was put out there. It's never happened before on the planet until that time. We called ourselves the Yakswees Warriors because it was in the Yakswees Channel. And we lived on that fish farm for 2 weeks. And I'm so grateful to all of the people who supported us while we did that. It took a lot of courage and a lot of help from the people in the village, and our chiefs were against us. The hereditary chiefs at the end finally came and said, okay, we won't let them put a fish farm here. But they didn't say anything about moving the already existing 16 farms in those waters that belong to the Ahousaht Nation. So we really have a lot of work left to do on the West Coast. There's a lot of Tlaloquiet warriors out there, our neighboring nations, and our cousins and our family who are doing a lot of work right now to put a stop to fish farms, and that's amazing. But what I really want to share is that it's really good to have our hereditary and elected leadership from other nations stand up and show the Ahousaht leadership what it's really like to protect wild salmon, because what they are doing and allowing is shameful. And as a matriarch and as a mother and a grandmother, it is my duty to protect our wild salmon. That is the first food that was ever fed to my children as babies, the first food that we fed to my grandchildren. And it is a food that we have, but it's also a relative, and that's beautiful. And we have an agreement to take care of these salmon and to put their bones back in the water when we are done so that they can replenish themselves, they can come back, they know their ancestors are there, and they know that we take care of them. I can't begin to describe what it's like right now to be a defender of the land, and a protector of the water, but also as a mother and a grandmother, to see what's happening to our waters, our worst nightmares, has come true when these Atlantic salmon escaped. And as was mentioned before, they have spirits and they don't know where they are and what they are doing. And it reminds me of white society. They don't know where they are and what they're doing, and they're lost. And so, as the people of these lands and these waters, it's our duty to show them the way, because we know what we have to do to protect the salmon, the bears, everything that lives in the ocean and on the land. That's our duty, to show people respect for the land. It's not all just for profit, it's to sustain us for the future, for my grandchildren's grandchildren, so that they can have their first foods as wild salmon, as clams, as broths from the ocean, the foods that feed us and sustain us and give us healthy brains and minds, healthy bones. Salmon is a beautiful and unique creature, and what is happening is very intense and scary, and we have to just stop asking people like Scott Fraser to protect these salmon or to make moves in the government to do something, because they're not going to. You heard his words. We have no time for patience. Sorry, Scott. There's no room for your patience. There's no room for bureaucracy and paperwork. There's no room to spend the next 10 years in litigation. It must be now. What is happening on these farms with these occupations brings me so much joy. I have a lot of personal things going on right now, and I can't be involved as I want to. My husband is in the hospital, but his love of wild salmon is what brought me here today, away from caring for him, because I knew that he would want me to be here. He would want our children to be here, and he would want the world to know we have to now fight, and we have to support those who are fighting, whatever that looks like, regardless of how we personally feel about what a fight is, because we are literally fighting for the life of not only the salmon, but for us as First Nations people and the people who came here on our lands and settled. Because this is a species that if it goes, we go with it. And it's the ultimate importance. And we have grave concerns, as mentioned here today. It's time to now just stand up and do what is right, regardless of how the government and the police make us feel or look. We have to be brave and determined and have discipline in the face of the fire and do what needs to be done, because if we don't, we are doing a disservice to the ancestors, we are doing a disservice to the future, our children's grandchildren. So we must, at this point, do whatever we can and whatever it takes to stop these fish farms from operating in our waters.